the Pod Network Entertainment.
Who's ready for story time?
What's going on? This is Xavier Woods, aka Austin Creed.
Let me talk to him.
Hello, WWE Universe in the Philippines. This is Charlotte.
Hey everyone, this is Jeff Cobb.
I have to finish the story.
We are pretty deadly. Yes, boy. Yes, boy.
Run!
Bang! The sniper is shooting you down. This is TMDK's Robbie Eagles.
Hey, this is the Cosmic Cactus, Paul London.
Hello, my name is Ilya Dragunov, the Czar, the NXT champion, and you're listening to...
And you're listening to...
And you're listening...
And you are listening...
And you're listening
to the Wrestling Podcast.
The Wrestling Podcast.
The Wrestling Podcast.
The Wrestling Podcast.
To the Wrestling Podcast. Yeah.
You're listening to the longest-running weekly episodic Filipino wrestling podcast. This is the Wrestling Podcast. It's your OGs, Stan C and Romoran, checking in on an audio-only episode, and we're about to head into spooky season. So it's that we give you a couple of Halloween-themed episodes as we usher in this really long week/long weekend. Now, only business owners are not happy to across on their calendars. So an advanced happy Halloween. We're going to say it again for next week's episode, but we're going to be among the first to greet you and your loved ones and your friends a happy Halloween.
Yeah, and on that note, syempre kasi may long break, and syempre we are all human beings that require some rest. Our friends over at the Pod Network and ourselves are taking a break over Halloween and Undas. So, pahinga kayo, reconnect with their family, with their past loved ones sa cemetery. I know that they're open now. I haven't been in a couple of years because of the pandemic, but I'm also kind of looking forward to taking a break and, taking it easy for a week, even though, it's ingrained na sa atin na we do the live stream and, the audio onlys every week and every other day. So we'll be watching wrestling, but we're gonna enjoy it and not work ourselves to death, to the bone, if you will.
Yeah. So what we're going to do for this week's episode, or this week's audio-only episode, rather, is we're not going to do your normal picks of the week, even though we've also been looking forward to sharing our picks.
Yeah.
We're different picks for this week kasi nga in theme tayo with the season of Halloween. We're going to give you 5 really scary/creepy things in wrestling that not a lot of people talk about. And you'll kind of notice from this handy list that we compiled with Chino's help. He's a resident horror fan of the podcast. Now, these are things that some of them either don't get talked about enough or are largely forgotten by the wrestling demographic.
Yeah. These are hindi ito yung we did a scary episode. I mean an episode about scary stuff I think last year, but that was about yung mga nakatakot in a way na naka-cringe or nakatakot for your well-being because it's a gruesome injury like a Sean Livingston type of deal. Pero this one is actually genuinely spooky in the horror trope sense. So it's not always that you see horror stuff in wrestling, especially now that our dear Bray Wyatt is gone. We'll talk about that in another Halloween-themed episode. Pero every now and then when companies do something in the horror sense, they do nail something that's really genuinely creepy and scary. Syempre, wrestling isn't an actual horror movie, but sometimes the creativity is enough to make you feel that, okay, these are legit horror fans and they do want to give you some sort of horror experience.
Yeah. If anything, tama yung sinabi ni MJF na wrestling really is, it's like ice cream, di ba? Marami siyang flavors. There's something for everybody. And while I myself am not a big horror fan, I actually dislike the genre. I know there are a lot of wrestling fans who love horror, like Chino, who really enjoy this type of stuff. So in honor of our fellow wrestling fans and friends who love the horror genre in wrestling, we're going to get into spooky season right here on the Wrestling Podcast.
Lewis, you in here?
We're going to start things off with Dexter Loomis's Haunted House of Terror. And this one really made its presence felt on NXT. And it's a more current example of horror really making its mark on wrestling. And ito, very recent, diba? Last 2 or 3 years.
It was 2021, yeah.
2021. I saw this as a 31-year-old guy, and it still scares the crap out of me. Like, even if sabihin mo na si Zombie Ref naka visual effects lang, si BFAB naka makeup lang, nakakagulat talaga the use of jump scares. So I appreciate how they were able to really surprise me and scare the BGBs out of me when they had Cameron Grimes run through the Haunted House of Terror.
Yeah, this was Halloween Havoc NXT 2021. Hindi pa rin nila explain why Dexter Loomis has a House of Terror, but some of these things were really worked hard on. So, yeah, as you mentioned, the zombie ref, the people in makeup. So this was legit scary. Maybe they also never really explained anything. It could easily be chalked up to a bad trip ni Cameron Grimes. Maybe he took some bad LSD, if you will. But it's one of those things that more recent. It's got nothing to do with Bray Wyatt, but they also really nailed the horror genre here, and they didn't have to go as hard as they did. But it was one of the things that really made that year's Halloween Havoc. Because you would just think, okay, it's a Halloween themed special episode of NXT, but maybe they'll just do horror pumpkins and costumes, diba? Sa mga match nila. But they actually went all out and had a whole ass haunted house, and I appreciated that. I'm not the biggest fan of horror. Like, I'll enjoy the tropes, I'll enjoy the stories, the settings, but I won't enjoy the scares, even though they linger with you, and that's the exciting part. Pero it was really well done. I have to admit, the sobrang galing niya. If you haven't seen it yet, if you haven't been watching NXT, because it was the time of 2.0, and we all know how a lot of wrestling fans feel about NXT 2.0, it's worth watching. Especially if you are not familiar with Dexter Loomis and Cameron Grimes.
So apparently the OG one, yung Dexter Loomis versus Cameron Grimes, is from 2020, before the 2.0 overhaul. Yung 2021 is when Carmelo Hayes and Trick Williams went through the haunted house.
Right. Okay.
It actually got a sequel.
Yeah. So, basta pandemic siya, alam ko. Kasi it was Dexter and it was Cameron Grimes, and I know, but di ba Shotzi was the host of that show?
I think so, or maybe yung 2021 na yun.
Yeah. Basta NXT Halloween Havoc siya. And it was really, really good. If anything, it would show you how good of an actor Cameron Grimes is. He just really oversells the shit out of the haunted house. And Dexter Loomis is Dexter Loomis. He is just the way he is. And even though it doesn't quite line up, it doesn't quite sync with his character, it's still pretty funny. It's still pretty entertaining.
Yeah, again, horror, not my favorite genre, but I was very much sports entertained by the Haunted House of Terror. Up next on our list is something very familiar to fans who came of age during the same time that Ro and I did in the Ruthless Aggression era.
I'm the boogeyman, and I'm coming to get you.
Yeah, so this one needs no introduction. The Boogeyman, who was just all sorts of creepy, from the worms to the look to smashing a clock on his own head, diba? Marty Wright was really onto something, despite the sketchy way that he tried to worm his way into Tough Enough, the season and the Miz were a part of, diba? Remember that was way over the age limit. And he tried to worm his way in, tapos nahuli siya. But somehow he found his way on the main roster anyway, and had a way better run than Daniel Pewter, who won
the show. Yeah.
So, man, geez.
Yeah. So a little background. So the Boogeyman was the character that they came up with, or Marty Wright came up with, because he was around 40 or in his really late 30s or early 40s nung nag-tryout siya for the Tough Enough nung 2004. So that was a big thing, and you're kind of old, but you look good. You're kind of old. You're just kind of old. So they just gave him this really character-heavy gimmick, which was the Boogeyman. And I don't know if it really lined up with his horror sensibilities or whether he was a horror fan or not. I'm sure there's an interview somewhere. But he really nailed it because he really went all into it. It's not creepy in the sense that you're gonna stay up at night thinking about the scary stuff that the scary getup that the boogeyman had. Although if you don't like worms, then it could probably keep you up at night. But yeah, he really went in. He did the whole worm eating thing. He put them in his mouth, and there were live worms. I remember somebody asking on TikTok kung totoo yung bulate dun sa na ginagamit ni Boogeyman. They were legit. If you saw the close-ups no camera when he was doing the thing, when he was bringing out the worms, they were live. They were squirming. There was nothing fake about them. Di siya pasta or anything. So that was unsettling. It was legit unsettling because he really leaned into it. I think that might have been the most committed performance that they had to horror in the WWE before Bray Wyatt came along, if I remember correctly. Because he was so weird, so bizarre, so strange. He didn't need any explanation. He just was the boogeyman, and he terrorized a whole bunch of people in the locker room in WWE, and that's why he is pretty well known and unforgettable now among WWE fans.
Sobrang ganda rin ng pagkakaselo ng mga victims niya, from The Miz to Booker T and Queen Charmel. They had that WrestleMania match about Booker T and the Boogeyman. So I actually forgot until I watched yung top 5 video featuring the Boogeyman's like biggest victims or whatever. Sobrang underrated element din sa look ni Boogeyman yung fact na legit bungi siya.
Yeah.
Like, if you look at the Boogeyman now on social media, he's had dental implants put in. But back in the day, bungi si Boogeyman. And you could see the worms like squirming out of the holes where his teeth used to be. And that's really contributed to a very gnarly visual for this dude who just reveled in scaring people, both the ones he was interacting with on set or in the ring, or those of us at home, diba? 14, 15-year-old me who was just getting the hang of watching wrestling on a weekly basis. So the Boogeyman was quite the character. And I'm pretty happy that he continues to live on in the world of wrestling through his Legends contract with the WWE.
Tapos, nakakatakot din siya for the people he actually worked with because he would dump the live worms on their face, on their head, and there's no. It's like Jake the Snake's snake and his python, diba? Legit yun. So, anytime you work with live animals, especially the ones who are kind of creepy, it's really a trip, and I don't envy the people. Sina Jillian Hall, sina Charmel, one bit.
Protein yun. That was a weird way to get your protein. All right, up next on our list. It's The Undertaker and all of the mind games he's played over the years on all of the opponents he's had, from his own brother Kane to the likes of Randy Orton to Diesel, from the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and AJ Styles in the year 2020. You have all of the practical effects, sound effects, visual effects all coming together in all of the mind games that they use to really prop up The Undertaker's character as the embodiment of the supernatural and the macabre in the WWE.
Yeah, so ito yung pinaka-first exposure ko to the horror trope in pro wrestling, right? So as a kid in the 90s, I know I started really seriously watching wrestling in the early 2000s. But syempre, how do you not escape the awareness of The Undertaker, diba? Like everyone knew who The Undertaker was, even if you don't watch wrestling religiously or at all. Because everyone talked about the dead man character, the undead zombie wizard character that he had. So it's really impossible to escape yung consciousness of that era. And then when I started watching, he was a badass. He was American badass, about big evil. Tapos he got buried alive by Vince McMahon, and when he came back, he was the Undertaker again, the original Undertaker with some modern updates. Tapos it was around that time that he turned up the horror elements even more. Like he would do yung typical trope of appearing behind someone. At that time, it was Kane. Sometimes it was the Randy Orton in the bathroom, in a mirror, appearing behind you in the mirror. And then it was cheesy, it was cliched, pero some of it really was genuinely scary, especially when you're, not always a big horror fan. You're not a discerning horror fan. Na, okay, di naman nakakatakot yan eh. Ba't ka natatakot dyan? Pero it was really well done. Ayun nga, as you mentioned, the visual effects, the practical effects, even if it wasn't your cup of tea, the horror stuff, The Undertaker, you can also really appreciate how well done it was, and how well they were building up the story of the quote unquote murdered brother coming back to haunt the guy, the Kane, literally the Kane in to his Abel, right? So ang ganda nun, and I think the whole thing would have floundered if Mark Calloway, the guy behind the Undertaker character, didn't have a genuinely menacing presence. So nadala din yun eh. That's why Undertaker himself is pretty much a horror legend too.
Yeah, there was so much commitment. I remember when we were watching The Last Ride in 2020, but when Undertaker retired and he had his own version of The Last Dance, they were showing behind the scenes footage of those vignettes, the early vignettes that he shot with Brother Love or Bruce Pritchard. How they were in and see ano rin, Paul Bearer when they were in the mortician place, and they were experimenting with the coffins and stuff. You could see really the commitment that went into the Undertaker gimmick and how it would evolve over the years to him borderline crucifying Stephanie McMahon and like holding pulling her up into the ceiling of the arena, or Paul Bearer himself being buried alive in cement. And that's an image that I still can't get out of my head from the Great American Bash 2004. So all of the things that they did to really build up the Undertaker's presence and character, sobrang legendary. And I do agree 100% when you say na the Undertaker is a legend in the genre of horror.
Yes, sir.
Moving on to number 4. Bray Wyatt, rest in peace to Wyndham Rotunda, aka Bray Wyatt, and everything he did throughout his career in the WWE, from the Wyatt family stuff to the Children's Choir in 2014, right after WrestleMania 30, when he was really messing with John Cena, to later on when he came out with The Fiend, to when he corrupted Alexa Bliss, and then Alexa Bliss introduced Lily into the picture, to the dichotomy of the Firefly Funhouse version of Bray versus The Fiend, the being very twisted take niya on Mr. Rogers. Sobrang creepy the way that Bray Wyatt put his own spin into the supernatural gimmick. And I would say that in the modern era, like everything post Undertaker, Bray Wyatt continues to be the bar for horror, and no one has even come close to achieving that bar.
Yeah, Undertaker might have pioneered the popularity of horror in mainstream pro wrestling, pero Bray Wyatt was the master. That's why there are so many devotees of Bray Wyatt, like Chino himself, up to now, diba? Kasi he was just that damn good. The scariest things he ever did were The Fiend, tapos yung pagka-corrupt ni Alexa Bliss. Like, I'm lumping them all together here because it was really all just under his influence anyway. The Fiend was like a genuinely terrifying demonic figure. It's hard to look at, the Fiend mask and not be bothered by by the whole thing, right? That was I remember Alexa Bliss did this quick vignette where she had her own version of the German coffee commercial, if you will. She had this jump scare with Lily after kunyari, Zen meditation video, and then Lily comes on to freak the viewer, and I can't imagine that was a pleasant experience for especially my younger watchers of Raw, diba? So he perfected horror. You could tell na totoong horror fan siya eh. He brought everything he knew and loved about the genre to wrestling. And even though it didn't always hit, I will admit, I'm also like one of the biggest critics as well, especially during the latter part of his run. You can tell na he was loving about it. He lovingly applied horror to pro wrestling, and he was trying to push boundaries and trying to find the things that stuck, diba? That's something I can respect as a creator, as a wrestler, as a storyteller, and those things, I think, they pushed the boundaries of horror and wrestling. They took horror and wrestling from something corny into something really serious. The everything was a craft to him, and if you I don't think yun nga, as I mentioned, I don't think there was a thing that he did that didn't scare at least one person. Diba? Everyone had to be scared by at least one thing that he did as Bray Wyatt.
There's one thing about the Fiend that really stands out to me. It's how he had yung severed Bray Wyatt head na lantern. Like, first time I saw that, I couldn't take my eyes off it, but it was also so unsettling. And then the way that the Fiend would walk, diba, so differently from Bray Wyatt. The mask, the Universal Championship in his image and likeness. It was really just peak horror Bray Wyatt. And if there's one thing that I lament from the way that the Fiend's run ended, it's that he was basically killed by Goldberg. Like, I really, like, as a Bray Wyatt fan, I really feel so terrible that that's how the Fiend as a character was killed off, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. Vince McMahon ruined the Fiend, I think. Bray Wyatt had we knew that Bray Wyatt had ideas. We'll talk about this a little more in the next episode. Bray Wyatt had ideas, pero Vince McMahon largely diluted them. Whether or not the last run that he had kind of justifies the fact that medyo kailangan yung oversight is irrelevant because he had something going. I enjoyed the Fiend. I enjoyed the Firefly Funhouse, but he was just made to look like a chump so much. Kaya nasayang din. Nasayang yung pagka nakakatakot niya.
Yeah. So there you go. Bray Wyatt at number 4 in this list. And we're going to close things out with something from AEW. And this is a character that we haven't really seen on TV in about a year, over a year. I've stopped counting at this point. That's Abaddon. Akong sound effect of Abaddon. So we're just going to get into why she works as a character. The way that she enters yung parang yung gumagapang siya na minsan pabaligtad pa, dun palang ma-unsettle ka na because it reminds you of Bray Wyatt, and the fact that her makeup, the fact that she really acts like a different person or a different creature, a demonic figure in AEW is so unique. So unique that there's literally no one else in AEW who can do that. Kaya rin siguro wala nang maitapat against Abaddon. And out of curiosity, when I first saw Abaddon, I tried to look for her on social media without the makeup, and it was genuinely surprising how attractive this woman is. Abaddon character.
Tawag dun, we don't get to talk about Abaddon so much because she isn't like one of the. I don't think she's actually signed to AEW. That's one of those things. She is brought along for the Dark shows when Dark was still a thing, and then she got injured. Kaya you don't see her anymore. I don't know if she is recovered now or if she's continued. But she hasn't really been booked in AEW since. But she is super fucking scary. Like takot na takot ako sa kanya. The makeup is so good. The entire Abaddon look is straight out of the original Exorcist. If you were like me, a child of the 90s and 2000s, you experienced the Regan jump scare. It's really like that. For those who haven't seen Abaddon yet, I suggest you go Google it. Kasi Google Abaddon. Kasi that is serious craftsmanship when it comes to makeup and costume design. Even until now, anytime I see a picture of her in full getup on social media, it's hard to not scroll past really quickly. So that's how scary she really is. She didn't quite get like a monster push. I don't know why. Maybe it's because they were I don't know, maybe Tony Khan wanted to focus on the quote unquote serious stuff in AEW, as I say that as he pushes Orange Cassidy. Pero alam mo yun, maybe the supernatural thing is pushing it too far. This was also before Matt Hardy joined AEW, so wala pa masyadong kakengko yan in that regard in the company. But maybe there is time for Abaddon to still be pushed. I think her brand of horror is also worth exploring, worth putting on the pedestal, especially now that we have a giant Bray Wyatt-sized void in the business, diba? A lot of people have been missing the brand of horror that Bray Wyatt brought, and I think Abaddon is like the best one right now to take up that mantle.
So correct ko lang yung mga sinabi namin because Abaddon apparently uses the they them pronouns, and
yeah,
and Actually, Abaddon has not been on TV since late 2022, pero nag-wrestle siya in mid 2023. So I really miss him on TV, and I would love to see Abaddon once again. So this character just really scares the holy living crap, ever-loving crap out of me. So props to the person behind the Abaddon gimmick. Napakagaling nila. Napakagaling niya mag-isip, mag-makeup. I think it really is about time that some award body like the Emmys recognizes wrestling, at least for the makeup and because Abaddon would be a shoe-in for that category.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Google nyo, please. Google nyo, especially if you haven't heard of Abaddon yet. You're gonna be in. It's an experience, I'm telling you.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And there you have it. That is our list of 5 genuinely scary / creepy things in wrestling that don't get talked about a whole lot. We hope that you enjoyed getting in the mood for spooky season, and that you share with us your personal favorites as well from this genre. Horror in wrestling is one of those subgenres na talagang nagpipeak lang naman during this time of the year. So now's as good a time as any for you to engage with us on social media at Wrestling2XPod on Twitter and on TikTok. Let us know your favorite moments, your favorite characters, scenes, montages, vignettes na sobrang nakakatakot, just so we can all get in the spirit of Halloween. In the meantime, we're going to catch you on Thursday for our normal Wrestling Podcast live stream. That's Thursday at 7 p.m. on Facebook and on YouTube. And you can also catch all of our episodes on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to follow us individually on social media. It is at RoisWar, at Chino Supersized, at EML_Meister, at Monday Night Rowan, and at _Stan C. Thank you very much to Babyface producer Jasper and all of the other producers over at the Pod Network for all of the work that they do behind the scenes. And on behalf of Ro Moran, this is another episode of the Wrestling Podcast in the books. My name is Stan C. Stay safe, stay healthy, and don't be a dick. Wrestling Podcast out. Bye-bye.
Peace.
The opinions of podcast creators, hosts, and guests are not necessarily reflective of the official stance of the Pod Network Entertainment, its hosts, or other network programs. The content created by the people behind the podcast is personal and not meant to harm any religion, ethnicity, group, organization, company, or individual.